Hi, it's Mr. Ta, and I will be reading Owl Moon with you. While I read, I may ask you a thinking question or two to help you do your best thinking. When I'm done, you should write those in your online reading response journal as a read aloud response. Remember, you can always watch the video again if you need to. And now, Owl Moon by Jane Yolen, illustrated by John Schoenherr. It was late one winter night, long past my bedtime, when Pa and I went owling. There was no wind. The trees stood still as giant statues, and the moon was so bright the sky seemed to shine. Somewhere behind us, a train whistle blew, long and low, like a sad, sad song. All right, stop for a second. Time out. I noticed Jane Yolen uses a lot of descriptive terms when it comes to setting, and you're going to see that she uses descriptive words to describe the setting based on how things look, how they sound, and how they feel. So you're going to see those things happen a lot. So as I read, pay really close attention to how things look, sound, and feel. For example, here, look at this. First of all, we know it's long past your bedtime. That's one thing. There was no wind. The trees stood still as giant statues. She's using what's called a simile when you compare one thing to another. The moon was so bright the sky seemed to shine, and somewhere behind us a train whistle blew long and low like a sad, sad song. Here, another simile. She's comparing the whistle to a song. 5 different places in this one page describing the setting. So here's a fun game. When I read, every time you hear her describe setting, either by the way things look, sound, or feel, I want you to put up a finger. Let's see how many times she does it per page. All right. All right. Let's read that line again. Somewhere behind us, a train whistle blew, long and low, like a sad, sad song. Our feet crunched over the crisp snow, and little gray footprints followed us. Pa made a long shadow, but mine was short and round. I had to run after him every now and then to keep up, and my short, round shadow bumped after me. But I never called out. If you go owling, you have to be quiet. That's what Pa always says. I had been waiting to go owling with Pa for a long, long time. I could hear it through the woolen cap Pa had pulled down over my ears. A farm dog answered the train, and then a second dog joined in. They sang out, trains and dogs, for a real long time, and when their voices faded away, it was as quiet as a dream. We walked on toward the woods, Pa and I. We reached the line of pine trees, black and pointy against the sky, and Pa held up his hand. I stopped right where I was and waited. He looked up, as if searching the stars, as if reading a map up there. The moon made his face into a silver mask. And then he called, "Hoo hoo 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 hoo!" The sound of a great horned owl. "Hoo hoo 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 hoo!" Again he called out, and then again. After each call, he was silent, and for a moment we both listened. But there was no answer. Pa shrugged, and I shrugged. I was not disappointed. My brothers all said, sometimes there's an owl, and sometimes there isn't. We walked on. I could feel the cold, as if someone's icy hand was palmed down on my back, and my nose and the tops of my cheeks felt cold and hot at the same time. But I never said a word. If you go owling, you have to be quiet and make your own heat. Right, stop there. You see what she did with setting? What do you call that when you say, I could feel the cold as if someone's icy hand was palmed down on my back? Do you know what you call that? Well, some of you said simile, which would be actually a good example that is accurately considered simile. It's also a special word called personification. That's when you take something that's not living, not alive, like we did with the Night of the Gargoyles book, and you make it seem as if it's alive. And in this case, the cold seems alive, like the cold feels like a hand that's on your back. I'll read that line again. If you go owling, you have to be quiet and make your own heat. We went into the woods. The shadows were the blackest things I had ever seen. They stained the white snow. My mouth felt furry, for the scarf over it was wet and warm. I didn't ask what kind of things hide behind black trees in the middle of the night. When you go owling, you have to be brave. Then we came to a clearing in the dark woods. The moon was high above us. It seemed to fit exactly over the center of the clearing, and the snow below it was whiter than the milk in a cereal bowl. I sighed, and Pa held up his hand at the sound. I put my mittens over my scarf, over my mouth, and listened hard. And then Pa called, "Hoo hoo 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 hoo! Hoo 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 hoo!" I listened and looked so hard my ears hurt and my eyes got cloudy with the cold. Pa raised his face to call out again, but before he could open his mouth, an echo came threading its way through the trees. Hoo 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 hoo! Pa almost smiled. Then he called back, "Hoo hoo 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 hoo!" Just as if he and the owl were talking about supper or about the woods or the moon or the cold. I took my mitten off the scarf, off my mouth, and I almost smiled too. The owl's call came closer from high up in the trees on the edge of the meadow. Nothing in the meadow moved. All of a sudden, an owl's shadow, part of the big tree shadow, lifted off and flew right over us. We watched silently with heat in our mouths, the heat of all those words we had not spoken. The shadow hooted again. Do you see where the owl is in the book? Look closely. That's it. You see it right up there. Sort of blends in with the trees. Pa turned on his big flashlight and caught the owl just as it was landing on a branch. For 1 minute, 3 minutes, maybe even 100 minutes, we stared at one another. Then the owl pumped its great wings and lifted off the branch like a shadow without sound. It flew back into the forest. "Time to go home," Pa said to me. I knew then I could talk. I could even laugh out loud. But I was a shadow as we walked home. Stop there. What do you think he means by I was a shadow as we walked home? I knew then I could talk. I could even laugh out loud. But I was a shadow as we walked home. What do you think a shadow is? Right. She is not talking even though she could. Why do you think she's being a shadow as she walks home, even though she's allowed to? Go ahead, tell the screen. Yeah, I think so too, probably. I might feel the same way. When you go owling, you don't need words or warm or anything but hope. That's what Pa says. The kind of hope that flies on silent wings under a shining owl moon. And that's Owl Moon by Jane Yolen. If you read this again or listen to this again, Look again through all of the writing for all this description about setting and even about character. Remember, you can also think about your reading skills when you're looking at this because there's a lot of poetic language in here. There's a lot of poetic technique. I notice especially repetition being used. And you can probably see as well there when we talk about figurative language, like the similes and the personification, lots of places where Jane Yolen is using the best language she can to make you really feel what it's like to be this character at this time. I really enjoyed this book, and I really think that you should try listening to it again when you get a chance. Anyway, until next time, I'm Mr. Ta.